my neighbor's driveway is their driveway. I said, no, that's wrong. You can't, house, he said, that's an old Tom Hill. I said, there's a house over there. It's been there since the nineties. Well, and you told me, how bad that was. Y'all ready?
Yeah.
The old man that had the house over there, never he died, and that's when she was son.
I'd like to bring this meeting of the joint Whitfield County Board of Commissioners and the Dalton Whitfield Planning Committee to order for March 27th. I'll turn it over to Chairman Litterdale.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. First order of business, to declare we do have a quorum tonight, 4 members present. Mr. Barr and Mr. Pennington are absent. Second order of business is to review the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there any changes, additions, deletions, motions?
Move we approve minutes as presented.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Tonight, we do have 9 requests to review. 7 of them are in the county, 2 are in the city. The second to last one, if you are looking at the paperwork, is not in the county, it is in the city also. Before we get to that, Mr. Ethan Calhoun from the county now, Whitfield County, will review the procedures and the necessary paperwork for those who would like to speak out in opposition to any of these requests. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight the meeting will be governed, of course, by the chairman, who will move through each item in the agenda. The procedures for every item on tonight's agenda are exactly the same. And how that's going to work is, first and foremost, the chairman will open up the public hearing. And first, there will be a presentation by staff. That'll be myself. We'll give a quick report over the findings from the staff and a recommendation of whether the staff believes the request could be approved or denied. Then next, the chairman will ask for the person who's here to rezone their property, the petitioner, as they would be, to come forward to the podium and to answer any questions that may come up or explain exactly what it is that's trying to be accomplished. Once the petitioners made their statements, the chairman will ask if anyone else would like to speak in favor of the rezoning besides the petitions. And once all comments in favor of that particular item have been heard, the chairman will ask if anyone here tonight would like to speak in opposition or against that rezoning. Anyone who believes that it's not a benefit to the community to rezone the property. It's very important, if you are planning to speak against or in opposition of any of the items on tonight's agenda, that per state law, we're required to have you sign this form. We have those out front. We have them listed for city or county, depending on which item that you'd like to oppose. And if you're not sure if it's in the city or the county, if you look at the agenda out front, we've got that clearly listed. So just note, if you plan to speak in opposition, please write the agenda item, something to let us know which item that is you're planning to speak on. Please sign your name, and then please print your name clearly so we can make sure that as you make your statements, we can enter those into the record correctly and we get your information. Once the opposition comments have been heard, the chairman will give an opportunity to the petitioner, again, the person requesting to rezone their property, to come forward and address any of the issues that were brought up during opposition's remarks. And if no new information is presented by the petitioner in their rebuttal, the chairman will close that public hearing. And at that point, no further public comment will be heard in regard to that agenda item. And again, the chairman will open up the next item on the agenda, and that same exact procedure will follow suit. And the purpose of tonight's meeting, again, is a public hearing to hear comments both for and against each item on the agenda. Once the public hearings have been held, the chairman will then move into the regular meeting of the Planning Commission. And you're all welcome to stay for that, but no public comment will be heard from that point forward. They'll simply deliberate, make a recommendation. That recommendation will be sent forth to the Board of Commissioners and the Mayor and Council of the City of Dalton. And it's at those meetings next month where final decisions to approve or deny these items will be taken up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ethan. First item or request on the agenda is to hear request from Jorge Ruedas to rezone from general commercial C2 to rural residential R5, tract of land, 0.9 acres on Old Grade Road, parcel 12-244-03-053. That is in the county. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can see here a simple request to go from C2 to R5. You can see the zoning map very clearly there with the subject property notated in the center, marked site. And you may recall this from last month. We had this rezoning come up. The petitioner was absent at last month's meeting, so this is a repeat from last month. And when we take a quick look at this area, it's fairly straightforward. The property as it stands, being undeveloped, the petitioner would like to be able to use this property for residential. And currently it's zoned commercial, so of course that would not be permitted as it stands. Based on the existing development in this area, you can see from the aerial photograph, commercial development is not common in this area, particularly adjacent to the subject property. It's very residential in nature. And R5 is the most common zone district for residential use in this area. Next, we see that the future development map has this marked as an emerging suburban area, which of course is planned for those areas that are able to accommodate additional development for residential use. This property being one of those, and of course that being a very large and consistent character area here, and the subject property being well within that character area. So changing from general commercial to R5 would be an excellent implementation for the comprehensive plan at this location, with no expectation for adverse impact to any of the adjacent properties. No conflict with the comprehensive plan, and similar zoning as to the majority of that in this area. So the staff recommendation here is straightforward approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Nope, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Ruedas? Jorge Ruedas? Absent again? So therefore, table twice.
I believe it's mandatory negative.
Mandatory negative, yes. Okay. Next item is Joshua and Jessica Atchley to rezone from R5 to M1, 1 acre on 530 Buckley Way, parcel 13-206-35-000. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have here a slightly more complex case. We have a request to go from R5 rural residential to light manufacturing. The purpose of this request began some time ago, where the petitioner was, their intent here is to be able to operate a meat processing facility on this subject property. Previously, we looked into alternative scenarios, and one of the options that the petitioner attempted to accomplish was to create enough adjacent property to equal 5 acres. And unfortunately, they fell somewhat short of that and able to create a general agriculture tract at this location. Because if they were able to go that route, they could have gotten a special use permit in general agriculture. And as you can see, that's a very common zone district in this area. Failing to get that additional land for the subject property to meet that 5 acres, the only alternative route for the petitioner to get a meat processing facility on the subject property is an M1 rezoning. That's the least restrictive zone district where this use would be permitted. So that's the background history on why this request is being made. And if we look at zoning in this area, we see R5, rural residential, islands of that, pockets of rural residential zoning and development. We see suburban agriculture and mostly general agriculture, larger lot tracts in this area. Next, if we take a look at the existing development from the aerial perspective, you'll see very similar to the zone districts, very low density, mostly forested, larger tracts with some housing. Subject property itself currently is not developed. It's part of multiple tracts owned by the petitioner. And you can see here, property, again, no existing structures or development on this specific tract. You can also see that this property would not have direct road frontage. It would have to occur through access from the other associated parcels of land with the petitioner's home, which would be to the west. Next, we can take a look at the future development map showing this area in the rural neighborhood revitalization. So these are areas showing for revitalization or redevelopment or new development to take place here, being primarily rural neighborhood residential development for the most part at a somewhat lower density. So when we take a look at this character area, heavy or even light manufacturing in this case, it doesn't fit the zoning in this area. It certainly would create an island or a spot zone in this particular case, being that there is no adjacent or even near proximity manufacturing to this property. So the issue of an entering wedge and a spot zone certainly comes into play. And the situation with the comprehensive plan, this of course is a far more excessive zone district than would be intended for the comprehensive plan at this location. And so there are several issues with this light manufacturing zone district. Again, there are alternative ways to achieve the meat processing facility that could be done in general agriculture, but the issue and the reason the petitioner has made this request is they were unable to create a lot large enough to be zoned general agriculture in order to get that permit. So they wanted to attempt to rezone to light manufacturing. Staff recommendation in this case, due to the intensity of the manufacturing zone district at this location, recommend a denial of this rezoning. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Joshua and Jessica Atchley, step up, please. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, sir. We appreciate your time this afternoon. And as the gentleman stated, we have exhausted every option to try to find a way to process meat in this area. We've lived here 18 years, raised our children here, and while I do have respect to the state's stance on zoning islands, we're just not able to meet that with the general agriculture situation. We tried to add land around us, was supposed to be here at the last meeting last month, and we weren't able to make that because of a purchase order for some land next to us had field lines on there. We weren't able to do that. So you can't own someone else's field lines is what I've learned. So this is kind of our last option to stay at this location. And we would appreciate it. We're trying to teach our kids. I was raised in this county all my life. I've never paid attention, to be honest, to the seal of the county. But I noticed there's a cow, wheat, and a chicken on our seal. There's no other slaughterhouses in this county. And all of our business is going out of county. If you go out of county to another slaughterhouse, 6 to 24 months wait. We're losing a lot of revenue. And we were just a small family business. We'd like to add to that. We already had our first inspection with the state and was going down that road, spent a lot of money and time in this location and didn't realize we weren't zoned right. We tried to ask the county, did we have to have a business license? They told us the answer to that. Thought we had all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed, but we weren't zoned right. So we would appreciate a look at rezoning this.
So that's your house on the property when the other picture?
We actually
The
have
west side of the property? Is that-
3 parcels there. We were an option of putting it all together. We have 4.35 acres. You have to have 5. We have made multiple attempts at all the land around us to purchase land to no avail. So, yes, ma'am, that is my land, but it's 1 acre is all we're rezoning, not the whole residential tract. And for that reason too, because with respect to a zoning island with the state, if it's kept at 1 acre, nobody can do nothing more in there than what we're wanting to do.
Can you maybe just describe kind of what your operations, what's a typical day? What does it look like? What do you guys do a little more specifically there?
We started out processing deer and have done that for 2 years, not realizing we weren't legal. The only thing not legal with me is a zoning designation. Started having our proper inspections with the state, so custom exempt cattle and pig processing. It's small family-run operation. It's nothing commercial. We make sure for our neighbors that we have the dumpsters dumped twice a week. And there's not a lot of heavy traffic, just not a lot of heavy traffic in and out of there because we're a small custom business, and we don't look to expand past that. We're just trying to serve our local farmers. So just a few cattle a week, a few pigs a week coming in. That's it. It might be heavier. It will be heavier in deer processing season, but no neighbor complaints to that as far as the traffic, other than maybe use of the road. But we have had that easement for 20 years now.
So Ethan, is there any way to allow just this particular activity, like with some type of condition or something that would limit, if they ever sold or anything down the road, then they wouldn't be allowed to just do normal M1 activity?
That's possible. You can condition it with that specific use.
Okay.
But we have to be careful not to set a precedent with an M1 item.
Sure, no, I understand.
On the overhead, it shows, looks like a lot of cars. Is that correct? No, is it?
No,
cleaned?
sir.
That's an old picture?
That's an old picture. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
It-
but like an old junkyard
It
or
looks like an
something.
old
Yeah.
junkyard.
And to be fair, I was in the demolition business for years. That's a lot of steel, but all that's been cleaned up. That's no longer there. It's an empty lot, other than 2 metal buildings.
So there are metal buildings there now.
There are, you can't tell it really in that picture, but there's 2 metal buildings there.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this request? Anybody like to speak in opposition? We have one in the back, 2 in the back. Sir? You raised your hand first? Give the paperwork to Mr. Calhoun. Please state your name and address for the record.
Charles Acree, 1001 Red Wine Cove Road. And I'm speaking on behalf of our surrounding property. We have several tracts of land that surround the Hatchleys. And, it hurts me to even come up here and speak against us. But this is majorly affecting the property. The easement was given by my father to Josh Hatchley for a, residential easement through our property. And, we've had several issues with, like he stated earlier, them taking equipment apart and having, different things scattered out along the easement of the property, on the side of the easement, which was our property, and that we've had to address through the years. And, even cut a driveway through our property straight up to this location they're talking about. And, they had a verbal rights to do so, but not written rights, and they had the wrong verbal rights. So, but, we excuse that. That's okay. But, now we've had, dumpsters with meat, on the property, and I understand that they have to have to take that meat and the trash truck will only come in so far is what was stated to pick the dumpster up, which was located on our property. And, so you've got, things coming out of the dumpster, and, it's just not very appealing. And then, so I asked him to, relocate that dumpster, and he did so, and he's been taking it from his establishment, all the way down the right-of-way, easement to, Old Dixie Highway, which causes damage to the road, which, through the weather conditions that we've had, it causes major damage. And, I have a gentleman here that will probably like to speak here in just a second, that has purchased the property, and I told him that it was a residential easement, and that he could probably gate this off and run his cattle, and, just as long as they would have access through the property. So, he's a little upset with me because of the things that are taking place. So I feel unfair. I don't want to speak against the Hatchleys, but I also don't need to leave him in that situation, and we have other interests in the surrounding properties. They had bought this tract of land and divided it up into 5 different parcels. And, I didn't really agree with that when that took place, but, that's okay. But it was zoned, residential R5, and I just believe it should stay that way, unfortunately.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in opposition? Your name and address, please.
Carlos Rivas. I'm the one purchased the property by side. Where we talking about, he already saying that he don't got no complaints about the trash. And the complaints is becoming on my side, because I got put in the trash, the big trash can in the stink on between the trailers. And I know the people, because I'm the one coming in and out in the driveway. He already explained you the problem with the driveway. He's trying to make a public driveway on the easement. For myself, I think it needs to be fixed right before he do that. And then he's running heavy equipment and do like a destroy. That's not right for me. And I haven't paid him before a lot. I can spend money on the driveway. And I understand he's putting money on the driveway too. But if he's want to make a commercial, why he's not doing right before and make us do all that? Has to run all the money to get to a property. Yeah. And, the piece of tract where I buy from this man is supposed to be a residential area. And now it's turned into a commercial and turned into a public. a lot of cars coming in and out and make the mess. And nobody been trying to fix nothing. Because when I first bought the property, the first lot, it was closed. It's not even road on it. It's just the house where they took the logs when they cut the wood before. And I had to buy me a bulldozer to level that out and put money on there. And then I found out somebody I was using, that was new for me. And then, well, I found out they got some legal papers. But that legal papers now means it's gonna come and abuse your driveway. And that's my part. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there one last person that wanted to speak? All right, rebuttals?
As to the road, I can respect that, but obviously if I'm running a business, it will be an even better road than it's always been. The reason I haven't fixed the road in the process of the last 6 months is because the Acres decided they wanted to log it. When I decided I was gonna start doing this about 2 years ago, put about $20,000 in the road, and since then, there's about 80 acres back there. They decided they wanted to log it this winter when it was wet, and that's why I haven't fixed the road. I was waiting for the logging operation to end, and then I was gonna fix the road. As far as putting cattle on there and keeping a gate closed on it all the time, that's not really gonna be feasible because I'm the only one here standing here today, but I'm not the only landowner. There's 5 other people that have an easement through that property. So as far as keeping a herd of cattle there and keeping a gate closed, that will never be feasible. I'm sorry for that, but that's my rebuttal.
All right.
And as far as the trash can, if I don't need to keep that there, if I may say that, I'm more than willing to make other accommodations. But the service that I have will actually drive to my location and pick that up. It won't be in the locations it has been once I get that road fixed. But like I said, due to a logging operation back there on that 80 acres, I've not fixed that yet, but that will be remedied.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Thank you. I think he answered most of it. Yeah. All right, I think we're going to move on from this request. Next request is from Danny Edwards to rezone from R5 Rural Residential to General Commercial C2, 211 Florence Avenue, .8 acres, parcel 12-296-02-047. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this rezoning going from rural residential to general commercial, which of course is a big change in zone districts, going from residential to our most intensive commercial zone district. And looking at the subject property, it's not a very large property, at just under 1 acre. We can see the zoning in this area, of course, predominantly R5 as the subject property is currently zoned. But we take a look to the east, we do see the general commercial zone district along South Dixie, or the highway to the east. Then we also see commercial adjacent to the subject property immediately to the east. Take a closer look at existing land use in this area. Again, you see a lot of residential rooftops, particularly along Florence Avenue. And when we take a look at the subject property at a closer glance, you'll see that it is currently residentially developed and has been for quite a number of years. Now, it has had some non-conforming structures on it, including an old manufactured home. You can see to the south, the backside of this property. And if we look just to the east, you'll see that small commercial building that's in that narrow commercial lot. Next, we can see the comprehensive plan showing this area within the suburban neighborhood. while the commercial is near in this area along the highway just to the east, the subject property is removed from that and within the suburban character area. But when we go back, we take a look at that zoning map again, you see it's adjacent to general commercial and not far removed from the existing commercial district. We also see high-density residential, and just to the west, you can see those purple zone properties. Those are heavy manufacturing. So this area has historically been a multitude of different zone districts and uses. And the subject property itself is being proposed by the petitioner to be redeveloped specifically into a mini warehouse storage site. We can see here the sort of preliminary site plan that the petitioner has provided us, show his intent for the development of this property. And at first glance, setbacks are met. Buffers, setbacks for the most part have been met. But we do find a couple of issues with their preliminary site plan in the sense that the buffer areas along the southern portion of this property where it would be required to create a 20-foot buffer could not be completed as it's currently drawn, as it only shows for a 15-foot buffer. And also over on the west side of this property, where it's adjacent to residential zoning, would be required to provide for a 20-foot buffer. While this shows a 21.5-foot setback, the issue here is that it's proposing an aisle, a road, throughout this development in order to access and drive around all the storage buildings. And based on the buffer, you can't have any kind of an aisle or road to drive a car on within a buffer area. Buffer area has to be undeveloped entirely and has to be fenced at least with a 6-foot fence and or vegetation that would be evergreen variety with at least a 6-foot minimum height. So in looking at this site plan, there was proposed 95 storage units of various sizes. And with all these other factors in consideration with setbacks, buffers, and those issues, we believe that it may somewhat reduce the overall potential for the design, the preliminary design provided to us by the petitioner, which may create issues long-term. There's also no stormwater planned for on the proposal here. And with very little additional space on this property shown on this site plan, that's going to be another challenge. So all those things will have to be accomplished in order, or shown to be able to be accomplished in order to, for this development to move forward, even with the zoning. So when we look at many warehouses and commercial development, especially in this particular area with commercial and immediate proximity and within sight distance of this property in multiple directions, the issue of creating many warehouses does not raise so much concern as the potential for other uses in the general commercial zone district and creating a larger general commercial zone that's surrounded by residential uses. So the issue here is that if the proposed development is not feasible or prudent for the developer to move forward, then what we have is a general commercial larger island with the potential to be essentially any other type of general commercial use. So the staff recommendation is not necessarily to deny in this case, but to table this rezoning until a more detailed site plan showing the stormwater plan, showing, providing for the buffer area and parking and so forth, to be able to show that there will be enough also associated parking with this in a number of spaces in order to make sure that this development would be in fact viable on this property and be able to accommodate enough units for this to be a prudent investment for the petitioner. Staff recommendation is to table until we receive a more detailed site plan. Happy to answer any questions.
Ethan, on this preliminary site plan, that shows a buffer on the, I guess it's the east side and not the west side. Now, on the east side, there is a commercial property.
Correct.
So should that be flipped?
They could potentially flip that and achieve the buffer on the other side. They'll also need to account for that buffer on the south side, which is going to cost some units because they're going to need to create at least, I believe it's 20 20 some odd feet in order to have access for emergency vehicles. Have to make sure that they can get emergency vehicles in and out of the development as well.
Just about 17 or 18 units to get the buffer on the bottom.
Lose it, yeah. It's a lot.
So even if they do that, the number of units would be much less.
Likely, and again, we're also not accounting on this plan for stormwater, which is going to take up some area given the amount of impervious surface this will create.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Edwards?
Yes, sir.
You can come on up and
How you doing? My name's Danny Edwards. I live at 211 Florence Avenue.
okay, do you have any comments?
I'd like to turn this property into a rental. It's always been rental income for my family, and that's what I'm trying to do, so,
Do you own the cabinet and shop next door?
no, sir.
That's another Edwards?
No, huh?
That's another Edwards, or was it Edwards
Well,
cabinet?
it was my granddaddy.
Oh, okay.
It was my grandfather, yeah. My cousin Chip wanted too much money for it. I couldn't afford it. But I do still own the 211, and that's what I was planning on, was trying to turn it into.
What are your thoughts concerning obtaining a stormwater plan and the buffer issues, if that cost you units? I mean, if this is a 95-unit proposal, it's very likely to, if we get to the point where you were able to get it approved and actually start construction, it's likely you're going to lose, 20 to 40 units potentially. Is it still a feasible project for you at that point?
Just depending on what I can keep from losing, but yeah. Right, as it stands right now, I'll be bringing in close to 8,000 or 9,000 a month. So if it knocks me down a couple of thousand a month, then I should be thankful for what I got.
It'd be probably more than that.
Well, it depends on what I put in there too. We just got through finishing the mini warehouses down beside Queen on abutment, and he was telling me that the 5x5s or 5x10s rented a lot faster and better for him. So I can revamp it on what I put in there. Right now, I just got 10x10s and 10x20s, and I can just.
I just want to make sure you understood,
Oh,
for it to
yeah.
kind of go forward, you're probably going to lose, maybe a third of your units. Potentially that stormwater, accommodation will
Well,
eat into some of that.
surely I'm not gonna have to put that big a storm. The property's only 140 by 250.
But
I
I
mean-
think, I don't know that to be an accurate statement that I made, but between
Well,
the buffer and the stormwater, you
Well,
you could lose that.
I've built houses and done concrete all my life, and I've seen a lot of stormwater drains and underground stormwater drains and everything else put in, and that was for 4 and 5 acre lots,
Sure, okay.
not less than an acre. So, I mean, I understand that it's gonna cost me money to do it, but
But you can live with the table position. If we table it till you able to present a better plan,
yes, sir, yes.
I guess.
And I'll get an engineer to get me some kind of specs on.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. For procedure, well, he's willing to table it, so. So we can just move on. There's that. So we're going to table this. So do we need to go
Do we
through?
still have to listen to opposition potential if it's tabled?
Yes. I think.
You think so? Let's,
You're welcome to do that, or
let's do that real quick. Is anybody else would like to speak in favor? Anybody would like to speak against, in opposition? There's one lady.
Is it all if I step up there with her, even though I'm not speaking?
Yes.
Yes, sir. My name is Frida Hudson, and I live at 213 Florence Avenue. And I don't know much about what he's wanting to do, but I do think that it's so close to our property that it is going to affect our property value, our taxes, and the taxes are already so high that we're struggling with them. So I'm not sure that this is a best interest at this time.
Do you have a problem with having warehouses next door if there's a buffer between you and them? A vegetative buffer of, what, 20 feet? Do you have a problem with that being right next door to you?
I really don't know. I've never really seen much like that. The warehouses I've seen have fences around them. And I'm assuming that would be okay, but like I said, we're so close to each other that I just don't know that it would be a good idea.
But by the time the new plan comes, it will be less number of mini warehouses. And if they put the proper buffering and proper stormwater container, which is not gonna affect your property, would that be okay with you?
I didn't hear that last part.
Once they go to the proper study and it's not gonna affect your property, would that be okay with you?
If it doesn't affect my property, yes, sir. It may be fine, but I just don't see how it would not affect my property, being right next door to it.
Well, they have proper buffering that protects your property.
Okay.
And they will make sure that there's not gonna be water running over your property.
We'll check more into it and see what we can find out.
Well, I think we're still planning on tabling it, even though we're listening to the pros and cons. So this will be reviewed again next month,
Okay,
and with a better site plan.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to close that and table it. Next issue is from Mitchell Kyle, seeking to rezone heavy manufacturing to rural residential R5, 2 tracts of land on 785 Peak Road, about 2 acres. Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This rezoning, of course, going kind of in the opposite direction in intensity now, going from heavy manufacturing to rural residential for this request. And first and foremost, we'll take a look at the zoning in this area. Going from M2 to R5, we can see the large purple district in this area being the heavy manufacturing zone district. And we see that sort of orange color in the screen, or brown color there, being the rural residential zone district. Of course, big change in land use and permitted uses. Heavy manufacturing, mostly industrial, rural residential, mostly single-family manufactured homes, as well as potential for duplexes. If we look at development in this area, you'll see that even though we see a large amount of manufacturing, the actual existing land use for most of this area is residential. Take a closer look at area, including the subject property and the neighboring properties, you'll see that essentially all adjacent property is either undeveloped or residential, single family for the most part. We see the suburban character area from the comprehensive plan, which again is for suburban development, existing neighborhoods, and the intent of this character area is to protect the integrity of existing neighborhood developments and to make sure that any change in development or any new development would be reflective of the existing zoning, lot size, and sort of development pattern already set in the area, being that it's an existing suburban or existing neighborhood area. As we looked at earlier on the zoning map, the most common residential zone in this area, including that adjacent to this property, is rural residential. So this seemed like the best fit for this property. The petitioner requested the R5 zone district. Staff recommendation in this case is to approve with no conditions or additions. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kyle?
Evening.
Can you state your name and address?
Mitchell Kyle.
Okay, comments?
The reason we're needing to have it to be rezoned is my parents live on one end of one of the parcels. My dad's had 2 strokes. My mom's getting to where she can't take care of him by herself, so we're wanting to move on the other parcel and build a house so we can be right with them.
Simple. No questions? All right, thank you, sir.
All right.
Does anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Excellent. That said, we'll move on to the next request. Next request is from Jordy Lara, seeking to rezone from R2 to C2, 0.7 acres at 314 Keith Street. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This rezoning here is a little more complex than some of the others tonight, in that the request here is, as I'll get into further explanation in just a moment, in order to take what is now a non-conforming property. It's zoned for residential R2, but is developed for general commercial use with a long-standing historic use as commercial. First, we take a look at the zoning map and the request itself to go from R2 to C2. We can see here what we have is a point of convergence between several different zone districts. The lime green color you see on the screen would be the low-density single-family zone district, which is what the subject property is currently zoned. And we see adjacent to that the heavy manufacturing zone district, as well as just to the south, general commercial, and even medium density to the west. So several different zone districts coming together here. As we look on Keith Street, when you drive on to Keith Street from the main highway, it begins as general commercial, transitions to heavy manufacturing, and then to low-density single-family residential. Looking next, we can see the, just to make a mention, the boundaries of the city of Dalton are adjacent to this property on 2 of its flanks, the south and the west. You can see the city of Dalton's boundaries highlighted in blue on the screen. And next, we look at development in this area. So you can see that development and zoning, in this case, in this area, are fairly consistent with the large rooftops for industrial property to the west, the south, and the large commercial district along the highway to the south. Closer look at this property. You can see here there's an alignment issue we had to address as well as part of this on our GIS system. Is one point to make, that not always does the overlay GIS lot line layer always line up perfectly. There's somewhat of a deviation to its accuracy. But we can see the subject property here outlined in red. And what we have currently on it is an older masonry constructed auto repair shop, very indicative, 2 big garage doors, brick construction. And what we see around the subject property, if you're along Keith Street, are residential properties to the east and to the north. If we look to the west, we see a very large industrial manufacturing building, and we look to the south, we have industrial zoning. It's not necessarily developed to its highest intensive use. There is a buffer between subject property and the existing use of the property to the south. Next, we'll look at the future development map, showing suburban neighborhood for this character area. Of course, when we take a look at this character area, we'll see that it does not take into consideration the existing manufacturing in this area and has overlaid the entire area for suburban neighborhood redevelopment. with the longstanding character of the subject property. I believe in our tax assessor's records show a 53-year establishment of the commercial building on the subject property, as well as most of the other commercial or manufacturing properties in this area date back around 50-plus years. There's been a long-standing commercial character on this property, as well as some of the adjacent properties. So one of the notes within the, or standards, I should say, within the future development map in the comprehensive plan is that in the suburban neighborhood character area, the intent, again, is to protect the integrity of the neighborhoods that have been established and not to change or alter the character of those neighborhoods with new development or redevelopment. But when we look at the subject property and its longstanding commercial development and its existing status as a commercial building and in operation over a number of decades, character has been long since established in this area. And while it is a non-conforming property for auto repair, there has not been a cease of this use now for 12 months. So in the event that the rezoning is not approved, it's worth noting that this property could continue to exist as an auto repair shop so long as that use is continued and doesn't change outside of auto body repair, engine repair, things like that, as long as it remains in that type of use. And that type of use can exist in perpetuity with no additional conditions. A staff recommendation with the complexity of this property and trying to mitigate all issues is to recommend that the C2 rezoning be approved due to the longstanding character of this property, as well as the fact that without an entire redevelopment of this property, there is no viable use for this building and existing development with a residential zone district without an entire total redevelopment. And the fact that the existing character has existed for over 50 years, we do not believe would propose a conflict with the comprehensive plan at this location based on that factor. A couple of conditions we noted in the end of the staff analysis that should be attached should this rezoning be approved. One of those being that there is still some debris where there has been some demolition work on the property to the rear lot. We want to make sure there's a condition that that would be removed prior to any permits being pulled. Next, we want to make a condition that was a historic issue on this property in its previous ownership and use, that no automobiles, equipment, or materials be permitted within the required setbacks or buffer area. We also want to make sure that there's a condition to address the fact that there would be no automobiles or equipment parked in a manner where said automobiles or equipment are partially or fully located on Keith Street. We understand that that was an issue in the past as well, and vehicles, because of this property, the building is quite close to Keith Street, and so aligning vehicles to go in and out of this garage, if they're left sitting out in front of it, can create an issue with narrowing the roadway of Keith Street. So we want to make sure that that's avoided as well. That's the staff recommendation, and with conditions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yep. Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jordy Lara?
My name is Harvard Kranzine with the Gregory H. Kinnaman PC law firm, and we are working with and representing Jordy Lara, who is the new owner of the property that we're talking about tonight. Jordy, after he took over, began extensive cleanup of the property. I personally don't usually go to the properties I close, but this one I did go to before we bought it, but mainly because of the problems with the GIS map, just to look at it on the ground. And the former owner was a very busy fella. As you can imagine, after 53 years of auto body repair, body shop, there was a lot of stuff on the property. He was given the opportunity, he did remove quite a bit of it, but he did leave quite a bit there. Jordy got rid of a kind of an eyesore mobile home that was in bad shape, which allows for more parking on the property to the rear. And there was also a lot of tires and some trailers, truck bodies, which is all cleaned up. Now, I went to the property today, and it's, very clean. I mean, there is some stuff in the back that still needs to be, concrete blocks and tires that are, but to look at it from the front, it's totally different. The former owner, like you said, was out in the road, and he was apparently a very popular body shop detail, picked up old cars, so he had a lot of customers. And he would use the entire property, I think all the way to the line to the north, because when I was there, it was, very full, very, used. Mr. Lara has, cleaned all that off, that, there was still, the former owner removed most of it, but there was still stuff that we had to get rid of. But as I was there today, it's in a lot, tremendously, better looking place. And like Ethan said, it's basically continuing, we just want to continue the use, but we want to be under the zoning that is appropriate for its use for the last 50-plus years, which would go under the C2 zoning is what Ethan has said it would have to go under. So we just, asked that, that y'all would approve the zoning to C2 to match its use. And Mr. Lara, I think, if you look at it, it's in a lot better shape than it has been. And he'll continue to do that. And we understand that they want the buffer. Not quite sure how they want that done, but on the north side. Now, the property is bounded on the west and south by two commercial property owners. And like you said, they haven't extended all the way to the south. The Boyd paving, is it Boyd, is south of us. And Mohawk used to be behind us, but they've sold out in the last couple of years to another company, I think, or one of their other companies owns it now. But there is an old road, and if you've been to the property, there ain't gonna be no road there. So there's a road that probably should be closed and split too to give more buffer, but that would only apply on the M2 side, so. But that's why the map looks that way. Those are old roads that were supposed to be part of the Union, was it Union subdivision or Union Point? Underwood subdivision had different names as they developed it. But again, we just asked that it be changed to C2 to match its use, as it has been for over 50 years.
You don't intend to change the nature of the business on the property?
No, at this time, we're using it for a service, a body shop, garage.
It will continue being used as it's been used for the past 53 years.
Yeah, as a, shop, garage, I don't know if it'll be,
Small vehicles.
I mean, we could change if you do C2, but, it's not that big a place, so. I think they've addressed the parking issues, getting rid of the mobile home and junk, so there's a significant amount of parking around it. I know Ethan, I saw that stuff in the back today, mostly concrete block, and there are a few tires, but the difference between last year and this year is, amazing. And there is, some of it's hard to get to because between Mohawk and Boyd paving, there's some water or drainage ditch that gets kind of steep, and some of that stuff's down there. But we are still in the process of cleaning it up. They've painted, repaired the windows, so getting it ready to be used again.
Very good. Questions? See the commissioners?
What?
Questions from that side?
Commissioners, go ahead.
No, oh, no. Sorry, I couldn't figure out what you were asking me. They're not leaving us down.
All right. Very good. Thank you. I guess they'll Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? This gentleman back there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Appreciate y'all's service. I have been a resident,
Get your name and address, please.
Gary Overby, O-V-B-E-Y, 212 Key Street, also on 301 Key Street. Have lived in that proximity for the last 53 years or so, 52 years. It was stated that it was a body shop for the last 50 years. That's a negative. There was a carpet store business in there that cut sample rugs, bathroom rugs, and a couple of other things. But the backside of the lot was filled with debris years ago, was not compacted per recommendations. If anything was put on the back of it, it would probably sink if it's not soft. I know the fellow that put the stuff on there. It's been a residential area forever. My daddy-in-law, my wife, and all were down there. If it is changed to commercial property, don't know whether he's going to just use it for storage, which I was heard that he was going to use it for. That would be fine. But a commercial manufacturing company, I've heard rumors to other stuff, a bakery, blah, blah, blah. If it's anything that causes a traffic in there, Key Street doesn't need any more traffic. The commercial property at Key Street and Murray Avenue, there's 2 event stations, parties and so forth. And on Fridays and Saturday nights, when you try to get out from Murray Avenue onto Key Street, you have to wait till another car comes through to go out. It's a 2-lane road, but they park on both sides of the road. If it was a commercial manufacturing, if they parked in front, you can't park a car straight in front of it. It's within roughly 10 foot of the road. I think it would, he has done a great job of cleaning up. I commend him for that. But as far as commercial manufacturing, I don't know what his intentions are. If he's gonna have a place in there to make stuff and cause more traffic in. And I have been in contact with several of other residents on Key Street, and there's several that couldn't make it tonight here to be in opposition of it. That's just my statement, and I appreciate y'all's service.
Thank you, sir. There's another one back there.
My name is Tony Welch. I live at 1217 Green Springs. I grew up on Keith Street, and it is residential. I know that map shows heavy manufacturing, but if you turn off of Murray Avenue, all you see, other than Kaler Industrial right there on the right, is houses. Where Mohawk and stuff is, it's all grew up. It's really not usable. It's a wetland right down through there. So when you go down the road, it's residential. So that map does show, and back behind there is heavy residential and stuff, or heavy manufacturing. And I know that that's one of the things he was using to try to help, say, hey, we can make this commercial because there's commercial around there. But there's houses all around there. There's kids and there's old people in that neighborhood. And that road is really not a 2-lane road. When you go down the road, you have wide spots that you have to pull over and let somebody pass. So any increased traffic is going to be a problem. I know he said he's going to leave it a body shop, a repair shop. It's been a nuisance for years. We liked Jim. He was part of the neighborhood. He'd been there for a long time, run that body shop. But it was a nuisance. They were in the street all the time. And I know he said he's not going to do that. He's going to park behind. But any added noises or anything like that, it's just going to be an aggravation to the residents. Like I say, a lot of those people are getting older, and they just don't need a business there. If he decided to change his mind and you say it's commercial, then 2 weeks down the road, he could say, well, I'm gonna do something else there, and he could draw a big crowd of people on a daily basis. And I just don't think that that's what that neighborhood needs. That's my opinion.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal? Mr. Lyer, Mr. Cranston?
One other factor is Mr. Lara's grandmother lives across the street, so I don't think he's going to be doing anything too crazy there. And also they own the property north of his grandmother across the street too. But all we're asking is continuing with what we feel would be a cleaner and better, more respected use of the area, the property, the existing building.
Obviously, the width of the street is a problem.
Yes, I was there today.
So parking on the street side of that building would have to be restricted completely.
Right, you would pull in, there is a garage door facing the road, you'd pull in there, and then you'd be out of the street, is how I guess they've been operating it. Yeah, I did look at the history when he said it was carpet. Ronnie Keys used to own it, it looked like, years ago, so that may have been when it was carpet related. But we only know it as the body shop use. We don't really have a way of knowing going back 50, but according to the tax records, it's been a commercial building of some sort in use for over 50 years.
And your intention is to do a body shop? Are you going to operate it, or are you going to lease it out?
Operate it, or depending how it sees or goes, lease it out, but keep it as a body shop.
Or automotive service. And we might, and the family could store stuff there too, like one of them said, so, we don't really, but I hear them, they are right, if it goes to C2, we'd have to do whatever C2, that would be an option. But our intent at this point is to get the automotive type business, body, garage.
Why would you need to change it, if it's already been in business for 12 months? Why would you need to change it?
Even if it's denied, you can still keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, one way or the other, he could continue to do what he's doing.
We at first, well, I guess, Ethan, we were told that they that they had to do the zoning. Okay, and then I checked into it, and I think the county attorney looked at it and said, if you don't change, you can still do the same use as commercial. But since we'd already done it, we might as well finish it, so.
But you're good either way, technically.
Yeah, we prefer the C2 just to eliminate the issue whenever it's.
You would rather have the C2?
Yes.
You want to do everything right.
Restrictions that the planning commission's hearing about the
Yes.
parking on the street.
Yeah, because if we go C2, it's gonna hurt us, because right now we're using all the way up to they were using all the way to the property line, parking stuff. So we're gonna lose, I don't know, Ethan, is it 20 feet buffer, or that we'll just, have to put trees in?
C2's gonna put more restriction on you.
For that, we'll have to downsize the width of the property.
Okay, so you could continue to do the same thing, but the C2 would put restrictions
And then,
with respect to a buffer.
right, it's gonna add the buffer and whatever, some other things that, the cleanup, Ethan has said they've done a lot of cleanup, but I was out there today, there's some more, minor debris. Most of the buildings are gone, and the bad buildings. So he's got it down to the shell, and he's redone it, painted it, put new windows, worked on the roof, so it's, did a lot of work to it. Because it hadn't had a lot of attention, the guy there was working a lot, and, he was getting the cars out, but there was some maintenance that we had to do.
Very good. Thank you. All right, I think we're going to close on this request. Okay, the next case is L&C Estates LLC, seeking to rezone from R5 to C2, parcel of land 12-077-01-036, a little over an acre at 3170 Chattanooga Road. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rezoning here is another going from R5 rural residential to C2 general commercial. somewhat similar to the previous rezoning in that this property historically has had a commercial building on it for some time, a number of decades. And it has currently, as the previous property, is zoned R5 rural residential. So as that being the case, this property is non-conforming. But unlike the previous property, this property's been vacant now for some time. So the opportunity to do anything else with that, use that commercial building that's there, does not exist unless this property is rezoned. Now, formerly, this property, if you'll note, the subject property is a very small piece at approximately 1 acre. Formerly, the subject property was part of its parent tract, which is the larger property to the east. And that's over 12 acres. So of course, the subject property previously was part of that entire tract. The petitioner has come forward to us in order to try to create some viable use for the commercial building on the subject property without rezoning the entire 12 acres. So what we proposed and what the petitioner has attempted to show here is rezoning only the 1.03 acres, as you see on the map, bringing that into conformity, while leaving the remainder of this property, approximately 12 acres, R5. So when we look at the zoning in this area, we see R5, R2, general agriculture, and we see islands of C2, both adjacent to the subject property to the north and, of course, sporadically around Highway 41. Here is a good example of the proposed division of this property that could be achieved through this request, and dividing off the 1.03 acres in yellow, making that tract A, and tract B being the larger 12.5 acre tract, which would be to the east. And that is already a flag lot, even with the subject property intact. There's a 50-foot easement or 50-foot flagpole able to access Highway 41. So this property, being R5, could be either utilized and developed with a single tract of land, or even maybe the potential of building a roadway and a neighborhood in this property in the future. But it would remain zoned if the subject property is rezoned. Tract B would remain R5. And the reason that's important is because, as we see in this aerial photograph, the larger portion of this property formerly would have been adjacent to a number of residential properties, and we don't want to create a large island of C2 at this location of over 12 acres. So this would simply rezone the subject property by 1 acre in size, which would be similar to the property to the north. And again, you can see industrial, you can see commercial adjacent to the subject property, and again, along Highway 41. Close look at the subject property with the existing commercial building. Also, you can see the commercial property to the north. We look in the comprehensive plan future development map. Again, we see the suburban neighborhood character area. And again, we see a similar character. We have a multiple decade old commercial building, still in good shape, still viable use, that is within an area planned for suburban development. And again, like the previous issue, the character already exists in this area. This would not change the visual character of this area or the commercial character that's already been established throughout this area and at this location specifically. So with all that in consideration, staff recommendation is that this rezoning can be approved. And of course, with any alterations to the subject property in the future, all buffers would be required to be met, as well as parking. So ability to expand the subject property for larger commercial use is very limited based on the very small size of the subject property. Staff recommendations to approve, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
LNC Estates.
Good evening. My name is Brianna Sabat, and I'm one of the officers of LNC. It's my brother and I's LLC that we started. This is a family property. I think it was originally 37 acres that my grandparents, James and Annelle Cowan, bought in, I believe, 1962. The property there, the warehouse, was in operation, I believe, since 1986 as a family business. And my brother and I bought the tract that Ethan pointed out to you, and we really just wanted to make that acre, the language that I've heard during this process, match its use. We would like to insure it properly for lessees, to protect us and a potential lessee, and have it zoned how it's been used for the past 36 years.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Excellent. We'll move on to the next. I think. Request. Tiny Tutors LLC. Request from R2 to GA, attractive land, 12-106-16-000, 14.4 acres on the right-of-way of Reed Road. Yeah, Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, this rezoning is unique. This proposed development is quite unique. The petitioner can go into greater detail in their full business plan and what they intend to do with the subject property. But we'll first take a look at zoning in the area and the proposed zoning itself. What is being proposed here is to go from low-density, single-family residential to general agriculture. And when we take a look at the surrounding uses or surrounding zoning from the subject property, we can see that everything to the north, the west, and the south is low-density, single-family residential, including the subject property. Everything essentially to the east of the subject property across Reed Road is rural residential. When we take a look at the city of Dalton, we can see that Hag Mill Reservoir and the properties around Windermere, of course, to the west would all be within the city limits. So we're near the city limits of the city of Dalton, but not in the city. We're still within the county. Next, when we look at existing development in this area, you can see here very clearly that along Reed Road in this location, development, of course, being of greater intensity closer to the bypass to the south. But as you move north along Reed Road, development intensity, some changes to mostly residential and varying densities throughout this area. And when we look at, of course, you got the Hag Mill Reservoir as well as the buffering properties owned by Dalton Utilities adjacent to the west of the subject property, which of course will never be developed. These will always in perpetuity remain undeveloped tracts of land to serve as a buffer for the reservoir. As looking at the subject property here, we can see a close-up view currently undeveloped. You can see the subject property outlined in red. You can see two adjacent tracts of land along the west right-of-way of Reed Road that the subject property sort of envelops at this location. And one of those properties to the west within the subject property is accessed by easement, which is granted through the subject property along that south sort of narrow strip from Reed Road. Just to get a close look at the character of this area, you can see the lot sizes, just to give you an idea. We do see some nearby suburban style lots in development. We also see low density single family. We look at the future development map. The area is noted as the emerging suburban and exurban character area, which these are areas in the county that they've had some development for residential use in the past and are positioned to accommodate additional residential development moving forward. When we look at the subject property being essentially undeveloped, the potential uses for the subject property as is are somewhat limited. A couple of residential lots could be created on the subject property. One of the primary difficulties in developing this property lies in the topography. And that is a significant increase in topography from where you enter the property along Reed Road. As you move west, there's a significant increase in topography moving up the ridge line, which then peaks approximately along the western boundary of the subject property and then begins to fall again rather steeply as you approach Hag Mill. With the limitations for potential development in R2, the petitioner has come forward with a request to go to general agriculture, not for general agriculture conventional uses, but because general agriculture is the least intensive zone district where a campground or an RV park would be permitted. And in this case, that is exactly what the petitioner is proposing to do, is to develop a unique campground and RV park. In looking at the subject property and its capabilities to accommodate RVs and campers, somewhat limited, again, due to the topography. So conventional RV parks and campgrounds in the sense of RVs and campers is very limited. So this is similar to a request we heard previously. Of course, different location, different proposal altogether, and certainly a more detailed preliminary site plan to show us exactly what the petitioner is intending to do for this development. And that is to create this mix of an area for RVs and campers, which you can see in the area. Laser pointer's not working, but you can see the area in the site plan. The large piece in the center, upper center portion of the property. I think Jake's going to help me out with the cursor here. Having some technical difficulties, but there in the center to the north, you can see the large piece there. That's where the proposed area for RVs and campers would be. Of course, there'd be a limitation to the number. There we are. That's the area, flattest area that could be graded and developed in order to house those RVs or campers. We can see parking over to the east of the property there, as well as the entrance and a small entrance sort of office as you enter the development there. Moving to the west, you can see the road winding up the topography of the hillside, areas to pull over. You see those diagonal lines to accept vehicles so that the road being proposed is not blocked. So this creates the opportunity for emergency access if necessary. We can also see additional campground areas, primitive campground areas that could be used for tent campgrounds or yurt-style campsites. Again, these, of course, nothing so far we've mentioned is a permanent structure. All these are intended to be short-term stays of no more than 14 consecutive days. And then the unique piece of this development is what we see closer to the ridge line. And we can see that through the cul-de-sac area where you see those small rectangular drawings there. Those are where the petitioner is planning to locate campers that would not be permanently built on a foundation or put in place, but to be set and attached in place. And these would be built in the character of what most people would refer to as a tiny house, tiny home. These would have a architectural characteristic of the Tudor style architecture, which of course gives reason for the name of Tiny Tudors. These would be the tiny homes with Tudor architecture that would be rented for short-term stay, Airbnb, VRBO type things. You may have seen similar campgrounds to this around other areas. And that's the petitioner's plan, and they can speak to far greater detail exactly of how they plan to operate the campground. Again, none of the structures proposed here for campers, RVs, yurts, or the tiny homes, quote unquote, themselves. They would be on a trailer with an axle and a chassis and could be removed and would not be permanently attached. So these would not be permittable dwellings for long-term residents. These would be for short-term stay only. And when we look at the comprehensive plan, one of the things to note is, within the plan, is the amount of units per acre. And when we look at the size of this property, and we look at the units per acre that will be proposed in the emerging suburban character area, we see a total of 28 units that you could achieve on a property of this size. Again, given the constraints of this property for conventional residential development, 28 units is not a feasible development for this property. But when we look at the proposal for the petitioner, the amount of potential future density here with short-term stay structures and campground areas would not exceed the density as proposed in the comprehensive plan for any buildings that would be remaining on site, such as the tiny homes and including the RV and campground areas. So the character of this area we do not expect to be altered. Conditions to ensure that are on the next page, the last page of the staff analysis. Condition number one has already essentially been met, and that was to provide a preliminary site plan to illustrate road access, internal infrastructure, buffers, camper RV lots, and green space. And as we can see here, the majority of this property would remain in green space because those areas shown for yurts and primitive camping, of course, would not be graded pads, things to that nature. They would be minimally invasive. We also, as a condition, would require or recommend that be required a 30-foot vegetative buffer surrounding the entire periphery of the subject property, including the frontage along Reed Road. Given the unique difference between this property and the residential character of this area, we want to make sure that that residential character and the natural state of this area is intact, which of course is part of the intent of the subject property's development as an RV campground. But we want to make sure that that's ensured in perpetuity. Next is a net density of 28 sites for proposed RV sites and tiny home campers or yurts based on the density recommended in the emerging suburban character area. Also, to require a minimum of 40% green space be accounted for on the site plan in order to preserve the integrity of the ridge line and the natural view shed in this area. And last condition be a fence or some sort of continuous visual boundary clearly marked around the periphery of the subject property in order to prevent visitors from unknowingly trespassing on any adjacent private property, including the undeveloped lots associated with Hag Mills Reservoir, because those particular lots along the reservoir are not intended for traffic. So with all those conditions in consideration, that is the staff recommendation to approve with all those conditions. Happy to answer any questions.
It is access to sewer to that property?
There is no existing access to that sewer, and it is, I did check with Dalton Utilities, would be a bit of a distance to get sewer to reach this property. However, as part of a requirement for any campground, we require that there be dump stations on site that would contain that waste on site that could then be, it has to be pumped and hauled and removed and taken to a waste processing facility off-site. So it wouldn't be a conventional septic system. It would be a dump, it would be, concrete contained, a dump site that would then have to be regularly emptied and serviced.
Okay. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Tiny Tutors LLC.
Good evening, Madam, gentlemen. My name is Pete Sanders. I'm from London, England originally. I've lived in Georgia for 23 years now, nearly 24 years. And what Tiny Tutors is proposing is more of a boutique resort. I don't like the word campground. This is going to be a very unique destination that will help discover Dalton and really help snowbirds, travelers, people that are traveling to and from their vacations for a short-term rental, but to help promote Dalton and see the beauty of the area, the history of the area, and just, as I say, we think this is a very unique, beautiful, the views are outstanding towards the ridge, just to help, as I say, give Dalton the name on the map that it deserves. So, as was expressed earlier on, towards the entrance, we are proposing to be on Neely Road on the corner there for ease of access for the RVs. And then the main priority for us is to preserve the natural beauty of the site. So this is going to be a very low impact development. The only clearing and grading will really be for the road. The entrance on Neely will be two-way for RVs, but the majority of the rest of the roadway and clearing and grading will be for a single lane road. The only major interference of the property is at the bottom of the ridge where the RVs will be placed. And that's going to be very limited in the amount of RV spaces that we're going to be able to put on there because of the topography. And then, once again, as was mentioned, it's going to be primitive campsites, so the site will be preserved to its natural beauty. And then, really, it's just towards the ridge, once again, a one-lane road, and we're proposing the tiny Tudors or the tiny homes that are very unique in architecture. In England, they're very historic and popular. They've been around for hundreds of years, but they're very unique here. We're just proposing a few of those tiny homes, tiny Tudors, towards the top of the ridge area. I think I've pretty much covered everything. I will say that we have gone over and above trying to get a brand new survey done and a preliminary plan, which was not required for going backwards in this rezoning. I wasn't required to do that. I have attempted to have the property surveyed. Unfortunately, we are behind schedule on that because our original surveyor passed away in January, and I did not receive that information. So then I initiated a new survey to be done, which has not been completed yet. And so although there may be some discrepancies on the property line, we're trying to work that out, be very amicable with the neighbours, and you know, I'm not a surveyor, so all I can say is I'm just relying on the professionals to do their job. Once that is completed, I can give a thorough preliminary plan as to what we have in front of us. But as I say, I just wanted to exceed expectations for tonight and try and give you something that would give you a picture on what we're proposing. Okay.
Very good.
Thank you. Question.
I have a question.
Sir?
The additional acreage or plot right here, what is that?
I'm sorry, this one?
Yeah.
Well, there's two. Hey there. Would you like to speak, or, yeah, there's very briefly, there's two separate lots here. This one is Mr. Cochrane's.
You're not
which is-
purchasing it?
No, unfortunately. We have been in discussions, but unfortunately not at this point.
Oh, that's not part of your property?
Unfortunately not. This odd shape in the center.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
How much room would you have for tents? How many tent sites?
Well, once again, there's this, until we get an accurate survey, topo, and my land plan, that's a difficult question to answer, but I mean, that's traditional campers in the woods, they want their privacy and the beauty of the area. So I'm struggling to answer that question.
So you, at this point, you don't know how many people could occupy this land at
Once
one
again,
time, how many campers, yes.
I understand the question, but once again, this is more of a boutique resort. We don't want this to be a traditional campground. RVs are slammed in close together, campers are slammed in close together. This is going to be a resort. And that's going to be a detriment to us if we do overfill with 10 campers or RVs. That's going to really backfire on us in promotion, but marketing, and everything. So that is not our intent. And I can go on record for that as well.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak in favor? All right, anybody wants to speak in opposition? There's one in the back. Ma'am, he got his hand up first.
Okay, sorry. That's in favor.
How you doing? I'm Craig Vaughn, most of you know me. I have the property that's due north of this. The easement he's talking about, he has not bothered to talk to me at all. It's under CRV. I'm not so sure that easement will work for him even, because it splits through my property. It was belonged to the Cockburns at one time where they had the sawmill, and then they gave that to the son to put his trailer up there. So I'm not so sure that easement's gonna work. I haven't been contacted about it or nothing. But what I'm more concerned about is the traffic on Reed Road. Y'all know how many wrecks is at that red light. I mean, it's every day almost. You know, and if you're pulling campers in and out of there, you're pulling tiny homes on trailers. I mean, I don't really get the full concept of it, and maybe I just don't know. But to have a house on a flat trailer doesn't seem very appealing to me. Then you got the sewage problem that's gonna be a problem. When you pump that sewage, you will get a smell. And, you know, I don't know exactly how they're gonna handle that unless they run the sewer all the way down there from BASF, which is a considerable distance. But I'm concerned about my neighbors more than me, because I don't live there. I live at 802 Battlefield Park. But I have that property there, and I've had it there for several years. But I don't think my neighbors would appreciate it. It's too transient. People coming in and out. You never know who's there. You don't, this day and time, shooting in Nashville today, you do not know who's coming and going. You're not going to do background checks on these people that are coming there. So for the community, I disapprove of it greatly. And as far as the right-of-way, that's something yet to be determined. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening to me.
Craig, so go into a little more detail about the right-of-way. I'm not real sure. I know he's got road frontage there on Reed Road. Explain to me, or
Well, when Neely Road cuts off right there, and it used to dead end into John Cockburn's house. Then David Cockburn later, after his grandfather passed away, put a trailer up there, and they give him an easement to the trailer. Now, I don't know about any other, you know, on the property on both sides of the road there for a little ways. There's a spring down there, and that separates my property from the property on the hill. I think it was David Cockburn, but I'm not sure. Do you have any more questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, this lady here, was she gonna,
We've discussed it.
okay,
I'm his tenant. I live in the home he's speaking of.
all right.
Thank you, guys. I've lived there for 7 years. It's beautiful, it's quiet, it's peaceful. This is not gonna be, what was his word? What was the word you used? a boutique. We are country. We're not boutique. There are 2 houses on that road. My house up on the hill, house at the bottom of the hill, and then the trailer he's talking about up on top of the hill. We don't see them very often because they're hidden. Reed Road is a disaster coming out of there. If you come out of there with a trailer too slow, you're gonna kill somebody, and it's gonna happen on a regular basis. I'm concerned with the safety. Like Craig said, you don't know who's coming in there. My house, the way my house is set up, you could walk in my back door and I would never know it if I'm sitting in my living room. You don't know the type of people this is gonna bring in. And I don't think it's gonna be safe. I don't think it's gonna be safe for the right-of-way. They're gonna have to widen Reed Road. They're gonna have to put a red light. There's gonna have to be all kinds of road work done just to make it safe for motorhomes to come in and out of there. I just don't think it would work at all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
Hi, my name is Brenda Hall, and I was a Birchville. My father had the property here where Neely Road is right now, and Reed Road didn't exist. Our house sat right there. And at the time, my uncle was very generous, giving the county a right-of-way to get bus and mail into the property, to the Cockburns. And the house was done away with. My father moved down the road. I have been in that area for 72 years. And now I live on Reed Road, used to be Neely Road. I started out with 1 acre with a house, and then I accumulated 13 more acres joining my property. And I was, let my daughter, when she got married, she put a trailer on the, what we called was a property line. And Mr. Vaughn, that owned the property adjoining, was my dad's cousin. So he deeded me across his property line to give my daughter enough room, and I have the diagram here. And we did it off in sections where I live, and this is Reed Road. Her trailer sat here, and I gave him my road front property for this property. And, okay, he wanted a new house up here, and he wanted to drive my property for a driveway. We swapped it out, no problem. Okay, then Mr. Vaughn, his wife got sick, and they moved back to Michigan, where she passed away. And then when he sold to Paul Baker, which is on Reed Road property, and I had power of attorney of his property, me telling him, if you butt this property of Paul Baker's next to your property on the house on the hill, you're not gonna have a way to get into the right side of that road, which he had another trailer sitting in there he couldn't get to. So eventually, Mr. Baker died. His daughter tried living there, and then Mr. Cochran ended up back with the property as the mortgage holder. And there's been a problem with that during this whole session of all the easements that's coming in. The tiny houses, I'm concerned about the sewage and all the water. Where's all the sewage from these tiny houses? It says it's gonna be 500 square feet. Where's all the sewage going to and the campers? Who's gonna regulate any of this? This is gonna be right close to my property, which they're saying is their property, because the property that I traded with the Mr. Vaughn back in '93, they was a surveyor out there at 4 o'clock this afternoon saying that this is the Tudor Tiny Homes property. This is their driveway. This is not Matt's driveway on the hill. There is so much confusion, they wouldn't none until now, and I don't know where the surveyors are coming from. They have got lines going behind my house, which I own from my house, from Reed Road to the top of the mountain. But where the trailer was set at one point here, they've got it going all the way across. Like I don't own my property. And I've tried to explain it to them, and they said they wasn't there to talk, they was there to survey, and that was it. Just like the one today. He said, I've gotta get through, I gotta get out of here. Because he had to report back to the owners that bought Mr. Vaughn's property. But I've been here, and I mean, I have owned up here, but they're trying to cut me out. And then they're gonna try to say, well, this driveway is theirs, not mine, and it's not the man next door. And it's not right. There's something, and the sewage thing, I wanted to build a house where my daughter's trailer was. I gave it to my daughter, and I bought it back from my daughter. So I tried to build a house there, zoning turned me down. And then we're bringing in tiny homes, 500 square feet homes with a number of tents, and we don't know who these people are, where they come from. It's like online renting for the week, for the weekend. We don't know. And who's gonna regulate all this? Who's gonna pick up all the garbage? We've got 3 natural springs running down into that creek bed where they're gonna put tents. And this is ridiculous. We have a lot of backup water now, and I can't see somebody taking somebody else's property when they've been on it for years. And I can't see giving up, I'm not giving up my second driveway to them. And I'm sure not giving up the mountaintop, because if they go in there and they tear all these trees down, all that debris is gonna come downhill. It's gonna start washing down that mountain over 1,100 feet down. And that's gonna take out my property in the long run. And I don't like it. I know yeah, it has been a single-family dwelling homes up till this point. But as far as having it washed out, coming down that mountain, I'm talking about ditches this deep, it washes out now. That you can't even climb down and climb out. That's how much water comes down there now. If they take all the trees out, and then it's gonna wash even more down towards my house. And I'm just totally against it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Any rebuttal?
My apologies to the gentleman earlier on about not contacting him about the survey, and we did talk a week or so ago about the confusion with the survey, and as I prompted this conversation, I just want, regarding the property survey, I'm not a surveyor. I just put those guys out to try and figure this out. So point number one. This result is going to be gated, and security systems. We are going to have employees there that are going to pick up trash and keep it clean. Once again, this is going to be run as a business, so it's in our best interest to protect and preserve the property. So it will be gated, it will be monitored, employees there. Regarding the septic, I've had soils analysis done on the site. There will be 2 different septic areas, one towards the ridge to capture the waste of the tiny homes, and a completely separate system towards the east side where the RV sites are. So we'll have 2 completely different systems. It will be professionally sized for the amount of pads and homes, and that will go through the health department. So they will all be correctly sized, monitored to the health department. The flow of traffic on Reed Road. I've done my research. There's 4,343 vehicles that travel on Reed Road per day. That's why my intent was to, if, capital I, capital F, my property line is on Neely Road, that is the safest entrance point to the resort. So I've taken a lot of consideration into septic, traffic, safety already. I've tried, in my due diligence, I've tried to address those items. One further question that was brought up regarding the clearing, the minimal clearing that's on the ridge and the flow of water. You know, best practices will be put in place once we're under construction and development, and you know, the silt fence regulations, the monitoring of the building inspector, et cetera, is very stringent. So that, once again, this is going to be minimally invasive, and best practices will be put in place to prevent any destruction of the site. I think that covers all of the concerns. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to cut that one off, move on to the next. I think, Commissioners, the next two are in the city, so the commissioners are going to be leaving us this time, since they're not interested. Next case is Omar Awad to rezone from R3 to R6, 0.44 acres, 843 McAfee Street. Parcel 12-218-27-000 or 004. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now switching, again, as you mentioned, to the city of Dalton, we have a request to go from medium-density single-family residential to transitional residential along McAfee Street. And if we take a look at the request here, is in order to take the subject property, which was previously developed for commercial use. It's had a number of previous uses, from commercial to, I believe it was a church at a point in time, and had since been converted into a quadplex, as it's currently used for. That, of course, would be, like other zoning hearings that we've heard tonight, non-conforming. So the petitioner's request here is to take what is being used as a quadplex and bringing it into conformity, which it currently is not. When we take a look at the subject property, it's a decent size, certainly larger than the majority of adjacent land. When we look at zoning in this area, we do see a dominant zoning district, that being the R3 medium-density single-family district. However, immediately to the south, across McAfee Street, we do see neighborhood commercial. You'll may recall not long ago, those properties came up for rezoning. They were non-conforming commercial buildings, and those received favorable recommendations and were rezoned some time back. If we look at development in this area, while we do see the large R3 single-family zone district, you will note the Matt Gaston Community Center. It's a large development in this area. You also note the commercial retail area at the crossroads, to the south of the subject property. So we have here essentially, functionally, sort of a community center type area within the city, where we have some neighborhood commercial, we have a community center with recreation, and we have this property, which as zoned, is non-conforming based on its use, and the structure upon it certainly does not lend itself to single-family use or remodeling or anything like that to accommodate a single-family conventional dwelling. We also see that the subject property outlined in red does have a decent-sized parking area, particularly to the north. We did somewhat of an assessment on this property and determined that the amount of parking that could be provided based on the existing number of spaces is more than adequate at this location. And that would include, even with a buffer, a 15-foot buffer that would be required on this property if it's rezoned to the north. So where this property transitions into that single-family neighborhood, if this property is rezoned, the northern boundary would be required to provide for a 15-foot buffer. And no parking could take place in that buffer, but again, we did a brief audit on site and determined that there are enough spaces to accommodate a quadplex based on our parking code. Next, we look at the future development map and the comprehensive plan for town neighborhood revitalization. Again, this is to incentivize new investment in areas and redevelopment. And this particular case here, of course, would allow the subject property to become a conforming property, which would mean that permits could be pulled on it, improvements could be made, and things like that moving forward. Whereas as it stands, construction permits, things like that are going to be rather difficult to obtain unless it's for something very simple like a repair. Ability to go beyond a quadplex in terms of density is not possible in R6. The most intensive use you can have in the R6 zone district is a quadplex. So this would not create opportunity for additional density at this location, not a full-blown apartment or anything like that. And when we took a look at the unit per acre density that you could achieve on this property with a quadplex, it's very similar, almost comparable to the majority of adjacent residential properties in terms of lot size and single-family homes. So we look at unit per acre density. While this does allow for 4 dwelling units on a single tract of land, those 4 dwelling units, when averaged across the size of the subject property, give reason to create similar and comparable density to that that's established in this area. So the overall character of the area would not be altered by this rezoning, and this would give a viable use for a non-conforming property. We see no issues with this rezoning, and make sure we recommend approval without any additional conditions.
Questions? Want to carry on?
He's gonna step out for just one moment. So would, Mr. Awad, if you'd like to speak?
Good evening, everyone. This property has been already remodeled into 4 units. I have the first request that is dated in August 2015 to change the property into like 4 units. It was a mosque. And we get through the process, and now we have 4 different meters. Originally, they had 1 meter. I remember Bill Todd called me somewhere in April 2017, and he said the certificate of occupancy is there on the shelf. I left it for you in apartment 4. And based on that, I took the certificate of occupancy and went to the Dalton Utilities. And that's how they installed the meters. I don't know how the paperwork went through the cracks, because every contractor we hired, he was responsible for getting a permit. And that's how it worked. And that's eventually how we got the permit. Each unit has its own meter, electric meter. So all this went through the regular process. I don't know how now, when we decided to sell it, it's been rented out as 4 units for the last 3.5, 4 years. So I don't know now how it is not permitted. It was permitted, and I have the original, the first piece of paper that I've submitted to convert it into 4 units. That's dated 2015. Unfortunately, I don't have the other permits, but I went through the legal process of every step of the way, and installing the walls, the fire-resistant walls, and installing the electric meters, and spreading it out, splitting it up properly. And Greg Williams was the inspector at that time. He came and inspected the walls, and he said, I don't like the walls, I want them all the way up to the roof. We raised the walls all the way up to the roof, and we installed like 1-inch thick fiberglass that's fire resistant. And we went through the process, but I don't have no means to check on the county or the city whether they have changed the zoning or not. Only when we decided to sell the property, we realized that, wait a minute, it's still zoned as a mosque or as a church. And I have 4 units that already occupied. It's been occupied for the last roughly 3.5, 4 years. So already went through the process. I got everything straightened out. And I don't know what went wrong somehow. And now we don't have it as a, but everything is on there, it's on the grounds. The electric meters, I wouldn't install them, Dalton Utilities came and installed, and each unit has its own meter, and each unit has its own interest, and each unit has its own backyard. So it went through the process of the inspection and approval all the way. Otherwise, they wouldn't have allowed us to get the power connected without the proper documentation. So, and we got like, for that, because it was a business, it was a commercial, they wouldn't allow me to do the work. They said you have to get licensed contractors to do the work. Normally, if I buy a house here, you know, I do the renovation myself. But they wouldn't allow me. They said you have to have a contractor. And that's what we did. We had a contractor for each step of the way. Electrical, plumbing, and even the paint wouldn't allow regular paint. He said get fire-resistant paint for these walls.
What dates did you have that done approximately? When did that occur?
Roughly, it was before 2017. We got the final approval on the property by Bill Todd on March 11, 2017. And it's been rented for the last 3.5 years. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Would anyone else like to speak in favor? Any in opposition? Okay, any questions, anything? Okay, we'll move on to the
Thank
next
you.
one. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
On the last one. Yeah, the Awards, no, there you go.
Next request is Jose Arias, seeking to move from M2 to R5.
Was this one that they weren't here last time?
Yes, it was tabled last time.
We want to make sure they're here before.
Before we go through this, is Mr. Arias here? Yes. Okay. Parcel 12-241-13-009 at 1503 Byron Street. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can see here this request. I think I went through this very quickly last time, and I'll just quickly hit the high points again. We have a property requesting to go from M2 to R5. As you can see in this area, the existing zoning, all the purple on the map is heavy manufacturing. All the yellow or the brown color you see there is rural residential. And as you see any of the blue there, that is high-density residential. Any of the red you see on the map is general commercial. So you can see this is an area that is rather diverse in land use and zoning. And we see multifamily adjacent to the subject property. Within a stone's throw of this property, you can see the R5 district already established. The petitioner's intent for this property is in order to remodel or redevelop it. Historically, this property was developed as a single-family detached residence. That residence has since been partially demolished. And in order for the petitioner to move forward to use it for either single-family or even potentially a duplex within R5, it would need to be rezoned as R5. As we look at the development in this area, you can see single-family detached. You can see also adjacent to this property to the south, multifamily, and you can see industrial. So in changing this property to R5, no issue whatsoever in terms of characteristic of land use in this area, as opposed to, or as concerning a negative impact or introducing any kind of character that's unlike the area. Both single-family as well as multifamily are adjacent or extremely nearby. Next, we see that it's within the town neighborhood revitalization, and anytime we can go from heavy manufacturing or commercial to residential, especially in this case, is an excellent implementation of the comprehensive plan, so there is no issue with any part of this rezoning. From the staff's perspective, we see no negative impact potential here, and we recommend approval, no conditions necessary. Happy to answer any questions.
Is this that building that's a shell right now?
Yes, currently a shell.
You pretty much see right through it.
Yeah.
No other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Arias?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jose Arias. I'm co-owner of Shared Properties Group. We do fix and flip, and we try to do new buildings too, new houses. And we got this property in Byron Street. So we just try rezoning because it's manufacturing zoning, and we try to do new duplex. So I think is the best way to the future buyers to get a mortgage loan if they get a building in residential zoning, you know. So I think it's the best way to everybody. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Very well. That closes our final request for the evening. And we're going to take a break before we deliberate. Sorry. Take a 5-minute break. We will be going into closed meeting here. You will be able to listen, but you won't be able to take part in it. After a 5-minute break.
Let me do it.
Oh, 4 plats? Well, that was a good break then.
Would you let me hit it?
All right.
I just want to hit it.
Good thing I got them.
You had it. All right, we're going to move into closed session, but people might want to hear what we're saying. We go back to item A on the agenda, which would have been from Jorge Ruedas. No, that was closed and tabled. No, that's permanently closed.
Yeah. that's
Because
the
that
second
tables
motion.
for the second time, so he will have to wait a year.
The automatic recommendation from the planning commission will be to deny
Automatic, okay. And then it will be a year before he could reapply, right?
if the commissioners end up denying.
Yes. So that's an automatic denial. Any objections to that? Okay. Therefore, an automatic denial there, Ethan? Next one is Joshua and Jessica Atchley from R5 to M1. This is on 530 Buckley Way. Now, that would be the meat processor. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's the one that require 5 acres.
Yes. You can't get it. It's the one that uses the road or the right-of-way.
If the need is for 5 acres, I don't think we see any need other than to deny it.
Well, there's two things. There's the limitation on the size and then just the fact that to rezone to M1, I mean, it creates a considerable island. I think that was one of the main
Sort of an
factors.
industrial spot zone.
I'm making a motion to deny it.
Octavia makes motion to deny, second.
Are there other options that,
Other than them being able to somehow
Acquire more property.
acquire more land for the general agriculture route. And then the only other option, and it's certainly an option, this wasn't a recommendation, that uses can be limited by condition. So could very well limit it to only being used for the processing facility, but some of the other issues raised with Steel and Maine in terms of an entering wedge with that location. Other than that, shy of a text amendment, there's no other alternative.
There would still be an adverse economic impact.
Right, and we still have an shared access easement that would be subject to commercial traffic.
Okay. Well, there is a motion to deny. I get a second?
Got it.
Chris seconds. All in favor, say aye. To deny.
aye.
The ayes have it. It is denied. Next one is Danny Edwards, 211 Florence Avenue, want to put in mini warehouses. This one was recommended to table until we can get a better
Stormwater plan.
stormwater plan, buffers.
Reviews, I mean, if it's stable, we don't need to make a motion, do we?
Yeah, we need to make a motion.
Move that we table till our
Okay.
next meeting.
So
Postpone until next month.
Yeah.
I make a motion to then.
Octavia makes a
table.
motion to
Second.
table. Chris seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Next one is Mitchell Kyle, seeking to rezone from M2 to R5, 785 Peak Road. This is one of the two properties. One has a house on it, I think, and he wants to
Build a duplex.
build one on the second plot.
I move to approve.
Octavio makes a move to approve. Chris seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Jordy Lara, from R2 to C2, 0.7 acres on Keith Street. This is the non-conforming or 53-year-old property.
It's the one that's actually better for them to deny it, right? This is the one where it's actually better to deny it because then you can continue with business? Is that-
Well, that would be an outcome if it was denied, but I think the petitioner's wanting it to be conforming, just, you know, if you borrow money or sell or, you know, so that the actual purpose it's being used for is lined up with the correct zoning.
At this point, he can continue to use it as it is?
As
or
if we deny it.
Or, or accept it. And I move the motion to approve.
You make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Ethan?
Motion include the conditions.
Conditions established on the recommendation?
Yeah, the conditions here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. As you mentioned it.
Motion is to approve with conditions as presented. Second?
She did.
Second, yeah.
30 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it unanimously. L&C Estates LLC. From R5 to C2. It's the commercial building on Chattanooga Road. Sounds cut and dried to me.
I make a motion to approve with conditions.
Second.
Octavia makes a motion to approve with condition. Chris seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 There were no conditions.
No, that's why he's laughing. The ayes have it.
I want it covered already.
It's covered yourself. Okay, Tiny Tutors LLC. Seems to be a lot of issues about the property lines in the survey, doesn't it?
I make a motion to table this till we get a proper survey and
I'll second that.
And revisit it?
Chris seconds that. All in favor of tabling until next month to get a survey, better survey?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Omar Awad, 843 McAfee Street, triplex, I think it is, from R3 to, fourplex, from R3 to R6.
I move we approve.
Chris, motion to approve. Octavio seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Mr. Arias.
Move we approve.
Chris moves to approve. Octavio seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. And that concludes the open requests for tonight. We're going to go into, we're going to be looking at plats.
The first plat is in the city of Dalton. It's
They're the same.
all plats from the city of Dalton. This is for Mr. Bart Barnwell. This property overlooks Sugar Road. It's behind the hospital at the end of Moist Drive. The property is currently split zoned at the ridge line, where the property drops back off to Sugar Road is commercial. Everything on this side is high-density residential. All they're wanting to do is add the property line on the west to actually solidify that boundary where that property can be sold as high-density residential. With one revision, instead of 1.27 acres, it will be 2.27 acres that was in this print.
So,
That's the property across from the condominiums, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
so this here to the south is all those other condos?
Yeah.
It's all high-density residential. This is already high-density residential. It's just adding the boundary line.
Got a motion?
Move we approve as presented.
Chris moves, Octavio seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Favor approval?
That's just me, I suppose.
100%.
Second one, again, it's just a city minor subdivision on Clark Street. It's a larger piece of property for Mr. John Davis. He wants to take the larger piece of property and subdivide it into 3 lots. The only thing that is abnormal about this is that there is a deck in the adjacent property to the north currently built in the building setback line. It is existing. He also owns that property. So if you approve this plat, you are approving an existing deck in the building setback line.
So this would have a variance on the setback for that deck.
You will be granting a variance for that, yes.
Is this the one here that we looked at a month ago or 2 months
No.
ago?
No.
No, it's not the same one. I'm just not sure where Clark, that's over off Wall Street. So there was one.
Driveway that did access the house to the north. He understands that he has to demolish that, so that will be removed. It was just a secondary access point.
And this is just a power line?
It's flood zone.
Oh, flood zone. So if it's a flood zone, is it usable?
It is because this is the 0.2%, so it's the 500-year flood zone. So we don't really regulate the 500-year. We only go up to the 100-year for regulations.
We're not gonna be around, we
I do
don't
my
care.
Basically, you've got
All right.
a deck that's over the setback line.
And this
Then-
parcel's being divided into 3
Yeah.
different lots.
Yeah, well, any motion?
Approve.
Second.
Jody, Chris, seconds. All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it.
Yes.
Next one is in the county.
Yeah.
Are you?
Across from Eastbrook Middle School. We do have the plat. I'm showing this for visual representation.
Pretty,
This piece of land is being divided into 6 tracts with a 7 that will create a legal parcel to the property behind it. Currently, there is no access outside of an easement from Eastbrook Road to the parcel behind it, the larger, the 12-280. So the gentleman bought the property, will give them legal access on track 1 that will connect down to Eastbrook Drive. The remaining 6 lots, he would like to build single-family homes on.
What's
It's
the-
creating a flag lot, that's why.
What's the fit?
I'm going out.
The width?
Each lot is 50?
Each lot is 57 feet wide.
Yeah, it's just minimally large enough, but the biggest thing is you got a flag lot on the back that it's.
Yeah.
Creating a flag lot, but it is technically improving the situation because that lot does not currently have a legal access to the road outside of the ingress easement.
Because there were two big lots, right?
Yes, 2 big lots.
So we should have something.
Move to approve.
All right. Jody makes a motion, Tevio seconds, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, the ayes have it.
Up the hill, the very top. Last one. This is a plat that was previously
Thank you.
approved and reviewed in 2020 off of Crow Road across from Polo Creek High School for Crow Road Holdings. The condition was put on the plat in yellow on the right-hand side was no more than 16 driveways may be approved for this development. Currently, Crow Holdings has 8 and is proposing 6 more in green. And that with the other developers out there, the 16 driveways have already been met. So now he would need a revision to this plat to add those in green. The reason being is that he would like single access opposed to shared access because he's having trouble selling homes with shared access drives.
Where's Crow Road? That's
a
Koala
Creek, yeah.
It's out there around Peden Loop and
Oh,
all that.
Koala Creek.
Previously, that limitation was placed by the school zone. I sent them an email. I didn't hear anything back as opposing to it. So it's really up to this body if you would like to revise that to allow his additional 6 driveways.
Go for it. I move to approve.
Octavio, first, second, Chris. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
Robert said 7:30 tonight.
Yeah, the over and under.
Over, under.
Well,
We can get, don't pay overtime.
that's my overtime right there.
That's my overtime.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Eric and David Omi.
Okay, see ya.
Wow.
Eric and David Omi.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I gotta find me one of these to miss. I gotta come up, it makes my live a boring life. I'm always
Well,
here.
I mean, spring's here, summer's here, you're gonna be going somewhere.
Somewhere. Problem is I just bought 37 acres and a house. It's got like significant remodeling underway, and that's, I mean, I had to buy a tractor. I bought a brand new tractor.
Tell you what, I've got a puppy that's destroying my house. I'll trade. I'll go drive the tractor. You can train the
Is that
puppy.
puppy?
My children bought a coonhound home right before
A
New Year's.
coonhound?
They went to buy a pair of boots and came back with boots and a coonhound.
So when you wanna leave
And
town?
then they're going off to college.
That's funny. They do that to you. They get dogs and, yeah, they
This
bring
dog
them.
is literally ripping the carpet out of my house. And Parker's headed off to college. I'm like, Well, no, we did an invisible fence in our yard, we're gonna